Hello and welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Carla Robinson and I'll be your host today, and we'll be speaking to video artist Jennifer Abbott, who just completed a cross-Canada tour, and she was looking into the meat industry, and she will be doing a new video called A Cow at My Table. Could you tell us a little bit about your tour? What gave you the idea to go across Canada?
Sure. Well, A Cow at My Table is about the barriers that we erect as a culture between ourselves and what is in effect our prey, namely farm animals. So it investigates all of the barriers that prevent consumers of meat from understanding how that meat got to their plates. So, of course, one of the big barriers is the physical barrier of the slaughterhouse wall. Slaughterhouses are in distant places, and they are generally very, very difficult to get into. So I wanted to include this fact as in part of the documentary, and in effect I wanted to prove that slaughterhouse doors were closed. So I wrote to 60 slaughterhouses across the country asking for an interview and a tour with a camera. And as I expected, I was denied on all occasions. Nonetheless, we traveled across Canada, my production manager, Warren Arcan, and myself, documenting slaughterhouses from the outside. So the intense security, the barbed wire fences, et cetera, et cetera. So basically that's what prompted the cross-Canada tour. In addition to other things, I wanted to investigate factory farms and also talk to people involved with the meat industry, spokespeople that are speaking on behalf of the meat industry and its practices today.
And what were they saying to you?
Well, first of all, the only people that I could get interviews with were the sort of appointed spokespeople. And they really feel that they have been attacked unfairly in recent years, or at least that's what they say. They claim that meat today is produced in a humane way. However, I think you have to look at what their definition of humane is. So they defend the industry, of course. They have a vested interest in doing so. They have a lot of money. They get a lot of money from this industry. So of course they tell you that everything's okay. But in my investigations, in my opinion, everything is very, very far from being okay.
What did you find when you went in? Did you actually make it into any of these slaughter plants?
Well, not the slaughter plants per se, but certainly factory farms. Although the meat industry doesn't like the term factory farm, they prefer intensive animal agribusiness. In terms of factory farms, which is really the way that most meat is produced, in fact all that you'd find, that most people would find at the supermarket, animals are, there's a lot of consequences to the animals in a intensive farm situation. They live, of course you could talk about each animal individually. Pigs and cows and chickens, they are all treated differently and have different life experiences, but they're in general confined, very tight cages, and they are routinely debeaked, tail docked, or castrated without anesthetic, other such things.
What did you find when you went? You went in there and you were arrested at one point. What was that about?
Well, we went across, here, just let me, one sec here. As I said, we went to different slaughterhouses and documented the places from the outside. At one such place in Saskatoon, Intercontinental Packers, 30 feet onto the property, we spotted the body of a dead cow. And so what I did was I simply crawled under the fence, documented her body for about 5 minutes, and then left. In the car, we were then surrounded by a security guard, 2 cop cars, 3 cops, a police dog, and I was arrested, kept in jail overnight, given a McDonald's bacon and egg McMuffin for breakfast, even though I requested a vegetarian meal, and then in court charged with mischief to interfere with private property. The Crown wanted, as a condition of my release, that I give up the tape of the dead cow, which I had stashed prior to the police seizing my camera, but the judge replied no, presumably Intercon has nothing to hide, so I was released, and I still have the footage. You know, I think it brings up a lot of interesting issues. The fact that the meat industry reacted the way they did, that I was arrested, that I was kept in jail overnight, it's such a defensive posture. And then subsequent to my arrest, the meat industry has put out 7 alerts in industry magazines warning of my presence and not to speak with me and not to let me on their property. So it's a very defensive posture, and one that I really think shows just how threatened they feel right now. Yeah.
So they're afraid.
Well, I don't know. I think they feel under attack. They are under attack. Their practices. It's interesting because they claim there's a certain social ethic in animal husbandry, which is if we take care of the animals take care of us, and that's a expression that goes way, way, way back, and they still use this expression. However, what becomes very blatantly apparent is since World War II, the way that we have produced meat is dramatically changed, and that social ethic and that old contract has been altered because it is no longer the case that animals have to be treated humanely for them to be healthy. The individual animal no longer matters. The individual animal is a production machine whose whole body is manipulated to do whatever it is the industry wants that body to do. So,
do you feel we've moved away from the family farm? Like,
yes.
How far away do you think we've moved from that?
We're very, very far from the family farm, that's for sure. You know, sometimes a family will still run a farm in the sense that it might be one family running the farm. But the public has, you know, in their minds this image of a family farm, which is, you know, a small little farm that's very quaint and idyllic, and there's pastoral settings and the animals graze freely. But that's not happening anymore. You know, it is absolutely routine and absolutely standard that, in particular, chickens and pigs are kept in intensive, confined situations where they might not ever even see the light of day, and they have no ability to do any of the things which is natural to them. They basically exist in an existential void, and at the same time their bodies go through all kinds of processes that the meat industry thinks is necessary for productivity. Like
hormones and...
Sure, hormones and drugs, and as I mentioned earlier, for the chickens, they routinely have their beaks trimmed. Pigs routinely have their tail docked, their teeth clipped, all without anesthetic. All of the male animals are castrated without anesthetic. So it's a pretty brutal, intense life. And I might also add that you don't want to rate the suffering of animals, like put it on a hierarchy, but dairy cows and laying hens have very, very, very difficult lives because their lives are longer. They live longer in these intense situations, and in the case of dairy cows, they have a calf a year, and their calf is taken away from them, the day after he or she is born, and it's a pretty difficult life, I would think. Yeah.
What made you want to go and look into the lives of the animals, I guess, or our connection to them?
Right. Well, I'm really interested in the way some things in our society are considered normal when, of course, they're not. They're socially constructed. And so I thought that modern-day meat production and consumption was a really blatant and quite horrific example of practices that are in society that most people don't question, and yet when you look underneath, there's so much horror. So in other words, it's an example wherein people are blocked from making connections, and it's our society that does this. It's our society that tells us from when we are a small child that we need meat for strength, which is not true, or the animals don't suffer, again, not true, or there's countless ways that religion, science, advertising, the media, the family, educational institutions, they all shape our relationship to meat. And so I thought it was a very telling example of how something in our society comes to be accepted as normal. Yeah.
On your trip, you said that you met a trucker.
Yeah.
And he had some interesting stories to tell, and was very hesitant to tell them. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Well, he's not so much hesitant to tell the stories as he is in portraying his identity or betraying his identity. He is a livestock trucker who is critical of routine transport practices and fears for his life, even physical injury and losing his job if he were to come out and speak openly. So he told me some stories which actually I found shocking. And after having worked on this project for 2 years, I thought, geez, I've heard it all. One problem in the industry is the situation for downed animals. And downed animals are animals who are too sick or injured by the time they get to the slaughterhouse to walk to the kill floor alive. And for an animal to be used for human consumption, he or she has to be killed on the kill floor. So in other words, you have an animal that's crippled and can't walk for one reason or the other in the truck, but they have to get that animal to the kill floor alive. And they're called downed animals. And the way they do it, it's cows or pigs, and they're big animals, cows 1,200 pounds perhaps. So the way they do it is, first they try and get the animal to get up using a cattle prod. And it won't be simply one man, and usually it is, the truckers and the people that working at the plants on the outside are for the most part men. Won't be just one man going at this animal, but because everything happens fast at a plant and they want things to go along, all kinds of men will come up, and you might have 5 men with cattle prods going at this one animal who has his or her legs broken or is very sick and can't walk. And occasionally, I don't know, I shouldn't say occasionally, I don't know how frequently it happens, no one does, but they'll use the cattle prod, in the most horrible ways. They'll put the cattle prod up the rectum, or they'll pull the tongue out, and it's just vicious, vicious stuff. If they can't get the animal to walk that way, they chain the animal by the leg and they drag the animal with a bulldozer to the kill floor. And I have a lot of footage of this, and you can imagine what it looks like with a sick animal who already has his or her leg broken being dragged to the kill floor. And I should also add, most of the downers are dairy cows, because they live longer and their bodies
so they've been used to the
Exactly.
ultimate point of being used.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was very interesting talking to him because he has these experiences himself, and he was able to talk about so many stories and put, to individualize a statistic, for say, and so it was, he's pretty courageous talking the way he is.
Oh my goodness, yes. So is he going to be in your video?
Well, he's not. I'm going to get an actor to imitate him because he doesn't even want his voice used. Yeah.
Or what about his name?
No.
No way. If
no.
he's not going to show his face, he's not going to.
I'm the only person he's met in person. He has Canadians for the Ethical Treatment of Food Animals set me up with him, and he speaks with Tina Harrison of that organization frequently. But other than that, he's pretty undercover. Yeah.
So when you first started thinking about this project, what was it that made you, that little tinkle, I guess, that made you want to look into it further?
I think that, as I said before, it was partially because I thought it was this example of a practice that was considered normal, which is so horrible. Also, I feel very passionately about the issues. I don't think that we as a species have a right to exploit other species the way we do. I think it's similar to, say, racism or sexism in the sense that it is one group, in this case, a smaller group of people, if you consider the producers and the people that are involved in the industry, exploiting this billions and billions and billions of sentient creatures worldwide. So I really wanted to look at how did our society come to this place where we are quite literally the most brutally carnivorous society that has ever been, and yet no one really notices it that much. It's just part of the way things are, and I really wanted to look at how it is that we came to this place, because it's a very, very sad place for me. And obviously it's a lot worse for so many sentient beings worldwide. And when I say we, I'm really looking at the North American meat industry and the meat industry in industrialized countries.
Yeah. So it's not just an animal rights issue then to you?
No. Yeah.
How do you see it, I guess, in terms of, you say that it's North American society. Do other societies, how do they compare to us, I guess? Or how do we compare to other societies around the world?
Well, I'm just really looking at North America and other industrialized countries. I think it's a relevant issue in a lot of places. But I think what's very important is to realize that the food that we eat is a cultural construct. So in Korea, you'll eat cat and dog. In India, you will never eat cow. Well, if you're Hindu. And in North America, what is common is to eat pig and cows and chickens. And people here think it's so horrible that other people elsewhere eat dogs and cats. And yet, to me, there's really no difference. Especially one can compare a dog and a pig. They are both very intelligent, sentient creatures. I've spent time with pigs who have just as much personality as my dog. And, so I think that it's really interesting to compare dominant North American practices with other cultures, because what you do, and when you do that, you realize that what seems normal here is not normal elsewhere, and therefore it's not really a norm, or it's just a convention. It's just something that society has told us is right, and in effect it's really something that is up for question.
So in your video, A Cow at My Table, do you look at how society constructs, I guess, this normality that meat is so much a part of us?
Yes. Well, that's the focus of it. It's to really question how we develop our relationship to both so-called farm animals and to meat. I was I was in my late teens when I started to make connections between the meat on my plate and farm animals and factory farming and the environment and and starvation elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. So why is it the case that I was so old before I started making those connections? And obviously it was because what I was told and by the educational institutions, by my family, by the meat industry itself, which is a huge culprit here. Certainly their advertising is by no means straightforward. You know, their ads usually have caricatured farm animals that actually ask to be eaten. You know, Charlie the tuna or Oscar Mayer wiener, those are classic examples. So really it's looking at all of these different facets of society and how they construct our relationship to farm animals and meat.
So it's kind of almost like a brainwashing from when we're children to when we're adults.
Yeah, I kind of steer away from the word brainwashing because I'm not, you know, really that interested in pointing fingers or blaming. I think I'm interested in an exploration of social processes and institutions. I think you can look at if you use the word brainwashing, you can look at our entire upbringing and say it was just one big brainwashing, but it's how cultural values are inscribed socially. So yeah.
So when the meat industry, I guess, is defending itself and saying, you know, we have humane practices going on, I'm trying to imagine their arguments. What are their arguments?
Well, I wonder that myself. You know, when you look at meat industry propaganda and you think, geez, there's nothing wrong here, and you wonder how on earth it is they can make these arguments. But I think, I mean, a lot of them, some people I'm sure misrepresent the situation intentionally. I'm very, very sure of that. It's in their self-interest to do so. Other people really, I think, see these animals as a means to an end. They see them as machines. In a lot of industry trade magazines, they're in fact, you know, the descriptions of them are their numbers. It's very technical language. It's objectifying language. So I think that it really, they see farm animals, they see animals in a very, very different way from myself. Not necessarily from the average person who, you know, it's up to everyone to voice their opinions individually. But I think that's where the ultimate juncture is between how they can say this is humane and how someone like myself and countless other people say, look, this is not humane, this is horrific, this is a tragedy.
So do you ever eat meat? Are you vegetarian?
No, I'm vegan, and I think it's really, vegan is a person who eats no meat or dairy or eggs or any animal products at all. And the reason that I'm vegan as opposed to just vegetarian is that dairy cows and laying hens have very, very difficult lives. Probably, you know, you don't want to compare, I don't want to like say this animal suffers more, this doesn't, but it's an irony that a lot of people give up red meat first because beef cattle actually probably have lives that are the best of any farm animal. They still graze for the first part of their life. They still have difficult lives. Lots of things happen to them, including transport and castration and branding and dehorning, all without anesthetic. Time at the feedlot, they may become downers. They still are slaughtered. But dairy cows and laying hens have very, very difficult lives. Laying hens live for an entire year with 4 other birds in a cage that's the size of a record album. And they never get to touch the ground, even though they are a ground-dwelling bird. So that's why I'm vegan as opposed to just vegetarian.
Where is it going to be released?
Yeah, well, hopefully it will be broadcast. It will go to film and video festivals, educational institutions, community groups. Interested individuals can get a copy. So we'll do the independent documentary circuit.
What has been the response so far?
From who?
From anyone from anyone you've talked to, or
right. Well, a lot of people are very interested. what's very interesting to me is that a lot of people, when I say what I'm working on, they confess what kind of meat products they eat, which is sort of funny. But people have been very supportive. I think one of the ways that I have sort of got through this project, in fact, is through the people I've met. The animal rights people, the theorists, the writers, all of these people who have been doing such wonderful work on behalf of animals that I've had the opportunity to meet have really been inspirational, along with the farm animals I've been able to spend time with. So people have been quite supportive. Of course, the meat industry is very hostile. There's some people that are very hostile. It threatens their way of life. It threatens what they do every day. But yeah.
Well, it's been very, very good talking to you. My name is Carla Robinson, and you've been watching Pressure Point, and my guest is Jennifer Abbott, and she is a video artist who is working on a short documentary.
No, it's actually feature.
A feature documentary.
It's
a feature documentary called "A Cow at My Table."
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.